Hi, welcome back to Exploring Politics. I'm your host, Peter Rapp, and on today's episode, we will be discussing various issues, such as the Eric Adams indictment, the VP debate, the Hurricane Helene disaster, and Mexico's new president. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Today we have three panelists on with us to discuss various issues that I've just mentioned. Here is Lily to introduce herself now.
Hi, my name is Lily Geneva Balario. I am a sophomore at LaSalle University with a major in political science.
Hello, my name is Matthew Berra. I'm a freshman at LaSalle University, majoring in political science.
Hello, my name is Jessica Perez Salinas. I am a senior in international relations and Spanish.
All right, thank you all for introducing yourselves. First, we're going to go to Lily's topic, which is the Eric Adams indictment. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
For Mayor Eric Adams, New York City mayor, is facing currently federal charges on bribery, conspiracy, wire fraud, soliciting campaign funds. He also is indicted on getting luxury items from Turkish officials from decades-long charges in corrupted activities. Acts including illegal straw donations in his 2021 campaign, and yes.
All right, thank you. Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Are you familiar with the ongoings?
Yeah, I mean, Lily, I think you outlined it well. Obviously, Eric Adams facing this indictment of various charges, bribery, soliciting contributions, accepting these contributions. The thing is, while of course all of that is bad, I don't think that any of this is unique to Eric Adams. I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find politicians who haven't engaged in these same things, and of course that's not a good thing, but I think a lot of politicians have engaged in these types of things, of bribery. Obviously, Eric Adams allegedly went on a lavish tour in Turkey, and then in return, he gave he made a Turkish office in New York, which without going through proper safety procedures, that is of course bad. But I do think it's interesting that apparently we're just hearing about this and these charges are just coming forth. So we'll have to see what the evidence that's to be drawn out in court shows, and I'll definitely be following it.
Right, thank you, Matt. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a question for Lily. How do you think this will impact New York's political climate or even the U.S.'s political climate?
I would say for everything that's going on right now in the media with the Diddy allegations, and a few days after, coincidentally, Mayor Eric Adams, I think there's a lot of corruption going on right now, and I think it's really scaring the American people, and especially the people of New York, because this isn't their first time with scandal in their political landscape. So I think that's a very big issue going on right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what is especially unique about this situation is that the charges are for donations that he received from another country. So there's a question of, is this treason? Do any of you have any thoughts on that at all?
Treason, that's very interesting. I didn't think about it from that perspective. Certainly the punishment is very great. He could face up to 45 years in prison. I don't think that he will, but certainly this is going to affect, I think, public trust in the government, specifically in New York, and I'd be interested to see how that works out.
I'm not sure if it is treason, but I do agree with what you said, the impact that it could have. And I just kind of wonder, he's probably not the first person. So at this point, if this is treason, I think it's more of like just a whisper that everyone does around New York.
Lily, as it is your topic, do you have any thoughts on is it treason? Is it just?
I would say I think it looks treasonous. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's directly treason. I think it's bribery, and I think people have been doing this for years in all political landscapes across the country. I just think he got caught. I think that's the issue. And I think people are now looking at their public officials and wondering, is my public official next?
That's a very good point you raised. Could this then spiral out to be people questioning, what is my local mayor doing? And are we going to see investigations into people that might have things very similar to this going on across the country, and the political implications of if it reaches that point cannot be understated. I mean, that would be it would uproot the way that our political landscape is in this country.
I mean, certainly if it was as extreme as treason, you'd have to go down a pretty long line of a long list of politicians who have engaged in very similar behavior. I don't think that it's treason to that extent. I think for treason there has to be a specific act against the U.S. government, against the country of the United States. I think that, again, if taken to be true, we don't know for certain yet, that Eric Adams' actions certainly are of concern to the city of New York and the state of New York.
All right, well, thank you. We will now move to our second topic of the show. We are going to go to Matt, who is going to talk about the vice president's debate.
Thank you. Well, October 1st marked the first and only vice presidential debate of the season, and I have to say, at a personal level, I do agree with Tim Walz. I would have much rather spent my Tuesday evening catching up with Dancing with the Stars, but nonetheless, I did watch the full debate, and I have to say, overall, it was a good debate. Putting aside, I think, the clear bias of the moderators that I think was present against J.D. Vance, I think for the most part this was a good debate. And the reason it was a good debate is because it was a policy-oriented discussion in a debate that was mostly about policy. And this is something that we're not used to as Americans. We're used to sort of this entertainment culture. For example, if we take a step back and we look at the Trump versus Biden debate just a few months ago at this point, there were times when I was watching that debate and maybe I would zone out, maybe pull out my phone, check Instagram, scroll, see what people are saying. But when Donald Trump and Joe Biden started arguing over who had the best golf swing, I was captivated. I was completely intrigued. Now, maybe this is because I'm just a simple human being, or maybe I'm like any other human being in the sense that I value entertainment and I'm entertained by entertainment. But that's not what we got with October 1st's debate. Instead, what we got was a rather boring debate, and I think that that's a good thing in politics. I think that we need boring politics because that usually means that you're actually discussing issues, not golf, issues that matters to Americans. And so I think that this is a step certainly in the right direction. Now, obviously, when it comes to debates, the question people ask is, who won the debate, who came out on top? So I'd be curious to hear my fellow panelists what you think about that, and if you agree with me that this was different than the typical debate that we're used to at this point.
Yeah, well, Lily, do you want to go first with that one?
Yeah, I think I can go first. I think both did, as Matt said, very policy issued, and I think that was very refreshing almost. I found it very refreshing that two people can sit there and also agree on things when the two parties are so divided in this country that we need to find some type of compromise and partisanship in this, what we're into. Who I think won is not a good response for it. Who I think did better was J.D. Vance. I think he was way more eloquated, and I think he knew what he was talking about. I think Tim Walz also knew what he was talking about, but also I think got a little tripped up on a few things personally.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Jessica, do you have anything to say?
I would actually say that although I also agree with Lily, it's a bit weird to say who won. I actually think that Walz won this debate, and that is because although I agree that J.D. Vance is an excellent debater, he's an excellent speaker, he said a lot of things that were wrong, and I think that immediately discredits you. And although both of them said misleading or false things, it was just way more evident in what J.D. Vance said than what Walz said, and I think that really hurts him.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that. However, what I've seen in the polls is that from this debate, both VPs are improved about 20 points or so in the favor of the American people, which I think is weird to see for a debate. So I think all of you are correct in saying it would be wrong to say that one person won when both of them walked away a lot more favored than they were before. And I think it is precisely because, as a lot of you talk about, they discussed policy that people want to hear about, and it might not be as entertaining as golf and how many people are at your rallies, but it is certainly a lot more pertaining to the lives of the American people. Any other thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, just to talk about something, Lily, that you said, I actually do think that, and I agree, that as a result of the agreement, there were these kind of like warm moments throughout the debate where J.D. Vance might say, I agree with Tim Walz on this point, or Tim Walz might say, I agree with J.D. Vance on this point. As a result, they both looked kind of moderate because it's not something that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing just mudsling, candidates attacking each other. And I do agree that both of them probably looked good on TV as a result.
All right, yeah, thank you. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah,
Quickly.
if I don't mind. I would say I think J.D. Vance did spew a lot of things that were false. I will say I do agree with Jess in that perspective, but I think that J.D. was he knew what he was doing, I would say. And you can tell that this wasn't his first debate. And with Tim Walz, you can tell he got a little overwhelmed a little quickly, so I would say. But yeah, I think both did great.
Yeah, thank you. So now we are going to go to a quick break, and then we will be back with our two other topics, those being the new president of Mexico and the Hurricane Helene disaster. Stay tuned.
Everyone has a community, a neighborhood, school, kids' teams, where you worship, work out, or any other place or group where you choose to belong. Communities can provide support when you need it, and even when you don't know you do. Like when it comes to preventing underage drinking and other substance use. Community members can be your eyes and ears when you're not with your kids and alert you to signs of potential problems.
Driving a truck for 40 years now. If people knew what I know, lives could be saved. Like that trucks can't stop quickly. It takes my 80,000-pound truck 200 yards to come to a complete stop. So I always do my best to give a lot of cushion. It helps when other drivers realize that and do the same. Please give trucks the space we need so we can all stay safe. It's our roads, it's our safety.
We live in a country that incarcerates its own people more than any other nation in the world.
The individual can age out of crime. He or she, 9 times out of 10, is no longer thinking like he or she once thought when they were 18. This is a good time to have a second look for everyone. We have 50 years of data that proves to us emphatically that the old way of doing things no longer works.
Hi, thanks for staying with us. Welcome back to Exploring Politics. I'm your host, Peter Rapp, and we are going to go to our third issue of the episode. Jessica, would you like to introduce your topic?
Yes, hello. I will be talking about Claudia Sheinbaum. She is Mexico's first woman to hold the presidential office and also the first person of Jewish heritage to hold the Mexican presidency. She is a climate scientist, so she actually worked on the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which is a part of the UN. They won a Nobel Prize in 2007 for their work on climate change, and so she has been a strong advocate of improving relations in in Mexico for climate change. And it's a big pivot from her predecessor, who was AMLO. He believed a lot in fueling the oil companies in Mexico, so she's hopefully going to pivot away from those issues in her new presidency. She's going to focus a lot on establishing the economy and reinforcing it. Mexico has seen an increase in their GDP over the last couple of years. However, U.S. companies have frozen around $35 billion in investment projects in Mexico because of the political climate. So this election was one of the bloodiest elections they've had, with 37 candidates for public office being killed, murdered, or tortured. And that is one of the issues that she's going to have to be able to focus on, the issue of organized crime, to be able to secure the feelings of American or other foreign investors in Mexico.
Got it, thank you. Do any of you have any thoughts on this new president?
So definitely Sheinbaum left with a lot of issues in Mexico to deal with, specifically with what, as mentioned, with relation to the cartels. I don't think that U.S.-Mexico relations are going to change that much with this new president, obviously a historic moment in Mexico, mainly because Sheinbaum herself was kind of a ward to the previous president, President AMLO, and they kind of have agreement on a lot of different policies. Like you mentioned, climate change, that's definitely interesting that they kind of diverge there. But in terms of the overall populist policies that AMLO pursued when he was in charge of Mexico, I don't think that there's going to be that much of a change when it comes to the governance of Mexico.
Lily, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say from the foreign policy sense, I do agree with Matt. But I think from a more inspirational sense, that like it's inspiring to me as a Mexican American woman, that a woman who is becoming president of this major country that, you know, was so dominated by men for so many years. I find it really inspiring, especially of everything of how intelligent she is. So I'm really excited about Mexico's future.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I think it is really interesting as well. Her background as a climate scientist. I don't know if there are any other countries in the world at the moment that have climate scientist presidents. I might be wrong in saying there are none, but it is definitely something good to see if you are, as I am, concerned about the climate crisis. And we are seeing right now with the Hurricane Helene, which we'll get to in a moment. What do you think her background what influence will that have on her policy, do you think, Jessica?
Well, her background, first of all, as a woman, but also as a scientist, will have a significant background because there is a major issue of women's rights not being heard in Latin America and specifically in Mexico. So she will be able to be that change and show people like, you can be a woman, you can have that power again. And in climate change, we're very hopeful that she will be able to institute some of the changes that are very needed in Mexico because Mexico struggles a lot with climate change. There is water scarcity in Mexico. There is a large oil companies that don't want to establish these policies. So it is hopeful that she will be able to convince them as an academic also as well that this is needed for Mexico.
Yeah, and one might also think that, you know, she has increased connections to the agencies and increased knowledge of how to go about bringing about this change in policy through the government, but also on a more institutional level, like within the institutions, what policies are better at helping solve this climate crisis. And speaking of the climate crisis, we go now to a Hurricane Helene disaster. I think it's fair to call it that. Hurricane Helene last Thursday, 1 week ago, swept through 4 states of the southern United States, first starting in Florida and then moving up through the Carolinas and Georgia. It's just been a complete disaster. The damage that it has caused is unseen since Hurricane Katrina. As of this morning, 190 are reported dead. Even more are missing. Infrastructure that is very critical to the management of these states has gone down. Many towns are completely wiped off the map. Bridges are down, roads are down, and rebuilding them is, at this point, not even a part of the question yet. It's how do we help all of the people that are there right now. Now, President Biden has sent 1,000 troops, or promised to send 1,000 soldiers to the southern United States to help assist in rendering aid, and also has mentioned trying to get money sent through, but the issue is Congress has just shut down until likely around December. They're going to sit out for the election, and unfortunately, they will not be able to allocate funds until they are reconvened. So Biden has talked as well about having Congress reconvene for this issue. Now, do any of you have any thoughts on the management of rendering aid to these communities or the damage that has been done?
Well, Peter, you mentioned that nearly 200 dead. Obviously, this is a devastating hurricane, devastating particularly on the Carolinas. You also wondered, how do we help people? I actually read an article this morning that was about basically this guy who owns a ranch in North Carolina. And what he did was he had mules. So in order to get help, to get supplies, to get food to the more mountainous regions, he actually used those mules, like pack mules, to carry those supplies into those regions that need it. So it's good to see that people who are sort of private and not necessarily just the government stepping up and helping out.
There are a lot of private organizations that have stepped up to the plate with this one, because it really is necessary. With the level of damage, the governments are not able to adequately respond right away, so it is good that private organizations are doing so. Do any of you have any other thoughts on that?
I think that this really shows to the United States that the issue of climate change will get worse. Hurricanes will become stronger, more devastating. And we've seen since Katrina, infrastructure in the United States is not built to withstand this type of damage. So we really have to think about, as the American people, how do we improve our infrastructure? How do we increase aid to FEMA, all of these disaster prevention agencies, to limit or minimize the amount of damage that will eventually come from this?
Yeah. Lily, do you have anything to add?
I would say, to piggyback off of what Jess said, I 100% agree that there needs to be more funding for these organizations working for the federal government. Like the EPA I feel like needs to have more funding. I believe FEMA needs to have more funding. That there needs to be issues, because this is only going to happen again, and it's only going to make things worse unless we do everything we can to stop the crisis of climate change that's happening in this country, and especially the environmental tolls that it's taking, and how people are dying, and how no one seems to. I wish the Congress would care more, personally. So.
Yeah, and I think this whole situation raises the question of, well, do we rebuild or do we build something completely new? Because the infrastructure of the Carolinas, it was not built to withstand the level of flooding and damage caused by the hurricane that it did. Florida has kind of been able to, not that they're in a great situation, but they're in a better situation because they're more used to this. The Carolinas are completely unprepared for this. Their infrastructure couldn't take it. So the question is, how are we going to build not just the infrastructure of the Carolinas where it has been taken out, but the whole country? Do we need to start building infrastructure that is built to stop climate disasters or mitigate their damage? What do you, any of you think about that?
I think it should be a mix of both. We can try to increase protections to mitigate the issue, but at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that we have to increase funding for them. And I think that is what I agree with Lily with, that the funding, it's because Congress does not care enough.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that we do need to, I mean, when Congress reconvenes very shortly, hopefully, if Biden can get them to do so, hopefully that is something that they could bring to the table and discuss. But that is enough on that topic. We are going to go to a quick break, and then we will be back for final thoughts. Thank you. Stay tuned.
Medicaid and CHIP offer free or low-cost health coverage for kids and teens. These programs cover doctor's appointments, hospital visits, prescriptions, shots, and more. As parents, we get peace of mind knowing that our children are covered if they are sick or get injured. You may now be eligible for Medicaid too, even if you've applied in the past. Enrollment is always open. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 1-877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Unused prescription opioid pain medicines can spell risk if they're taken by someone they weren't prescribed for, or harm if accidentally taken by a child or a pet. Safely dispose of opioids before they can hurt your family. Find a drug take-back option such as medicine drop-off boxes. If there isn't one available, check the FDA's flush list. If your medicine isn't on the flush list, you can dispose of it in the trash. Get information to keep your family safe.
Think buying fake products is harmless? Think again. Counterfeits are made in unsafe conditions, potentially using hazardous and even lethal ingredients that could harm you and others. Each year, billions of dollars worth of counterfeit products are sold in the U.S. I smell big crime. Think about it. If you don't know where the products came from, how could you know where the money goes? You're smart. Buy smart. Go for real.
Thank you for staying tuned for Exploring Politics' final thoughts for this episode. We're going to go around the panel and just see what everyone thinks about this discussion we've had today. Jessica, would you like to start?
I think after today, I really understand that climate change is going to be an issue that affects us all. So it doesn't matter what our nationality is, where we are geographically, it's going to get worse, and we have to find ways as not just a country, but as a global state to solve it.
Got it. Thank you. Matt, do you have any thoughts on this episode?
Sure. I think what today has shown us is that although sometimes it might seem like we're hard-pressed for hope, sometimes it may seem like things are bad and that we're in the thick of it, there's always hope for things to get better. It seems like there's a lot of corruption. We have, of course, hurricanes. We have political polarization that is higher than times perhaps seen since the Civil War. But there's always hope for things to get better. There's always areas where we can come together and agree on issues. There can be bipartisan support for horrible events that happen. And I think ultimately it's going to fall on this generation to help usher that age in.
Got it. Thank you, Matt. Lily, would you like to say your final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say I agree with everybody that our biggest issue right now in our country is, I would say, corruption, by polarization, and the climate crisis. I would just say that, I really hope one day that we can all come together on these major issues that are happening, and that hopefully one day that our generation can move forward and get over these tough obstacles.
Yeah, I think all of you had very, very good things to say that I think ring true with a lot of Americans. We are very divided politically as a nation. We have instances of corruption, like in the case with Eric Adams, and we do have many crises looming, such as climate change, and it's only going to keep hitting us harder over and over. But you do all raise a very good point that we as Americans and as children of the world have an opportunity to, like they did in Mexico, elect people who have a background in fixing the problems that we are trying to solve. So on that note, thank you all very much for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Have a nice day.